Today, we're going to be talking about alchemy and the four core pillars of self, which we mentioned in the last episode. Today, we are going to cover what alchemy is. I'm going to demystify it for you guys. Magic has been made to be largely overglorified when it's actually a very tangible tool that you can add to your tool belt. And so I'm going to be demystifying what alchemy is and how you can alchemize. And we're going to be focusing on the pillar of value, or the prostitute lover pillar.
And I'm excited for this. You introduced me to these. I think originally these are archetypes that were introduced by Carl Jung, and they've been utilized in traditional therapy for a long time. Understanding these things is really helpful as a coach, I will say, because it becomes really easy to distill down when someone is showing up a certain way. Oh, okay, I see what's happening here because they're in their prostitute. We see this a lot, especially with mobile bar owners, because it's usually their first business. They've come from industries where maybe they're teachers or they're nurses, or they are giving their service in some way, shape, or form. Even bartenders, like they're literally selling their service for dollars. And when they own their own business, they don't see the value in what they do. And I oftentimes have to tell people it's not just that you're going there for 6 hours. That's only a small piece of what you're doing for them. Yes, you're going there and you're doing this thing for them, but you're also bringing your expertise. You're bringing, knowledge they don't have. They're not having to do a thing themselves. There's value there. You're creating an atmosphere and things that are valuable. And that's usually the very first shadow that we have to work through, is the value pillar, and how and why as a business they need to be pricing themselves, which unfortunately, when you do talk about value, there is a price attached, which not all the time. I'm actually reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's about the indigenous communities and how for them, oftentimes there was no cash money. It was either gifting, which when we think of gifting, someone gives us a thing and that's the end of it. When they thought of gifting, it was a relationship thing. They were giving something, but then eventually they would get something back because they're building a relationship. Like that's come to be what value is a monetary thing. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but that is kind of what we look at when we're in business, is what am I giving a value that someone will pay me for? And if you don't see the value in what you're creating, you're not going to charge appropriately. And then we see people in their prostitute when we're like, if you want to make this a real business, you need to charge more. Otherwise, you're never going to make enough money. And that's when we wrestle with the prostitute, and we have to put them in their lover, which is like just valuing themselves and valuing what they do and what they offer, and really truly wrapping their mind around how what they do and what they offer and what they sell creates more than just X dollars amount of value in someone's life.
One thing I want people to understand about shadow alchemy and about what we're going to lay forth over the next 4 episodes is that moving from shadow to light creates tension in the initial phases, because we're asking you to show up in a way that is aligned for you. It is your highest self, if you will, but you have to move through the shit first. You have to move through the shadow. We can call this facing your demons. In the hero's journey, this is always the point where he has to face the dragon. You know what I mean? You guys have heard me talk about dragons and demons, and it's the inner self, the shadow self. And Hosier has a great song, The Arsonist Lullaby. He says, never tame your demons, but always keep them on a leash. And I think that's really potent, because when it comes to nature, there is a viciousness that is required for your basic survival. And you have to understand when to employ that viciousness. The problem is most of us are suppressing our natural rage, our natural viciousness. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have natural rage or natural viciousness, you're suppressing it. We can't help it. We are animalistic. You have to know when to employ that, because it can be a fantastic motivator. But most people are in denial that that even exists within them. And so then it's showing up in violent ways through addiction, through hyperfixation, through stagnation, through self-doubt, through all these various channels that we're going to cover over the next 4 episodes. So I'm ready to dive in. Sarah, do you have anything you want to say before we start cooking up?
No, let's dive in.
Yeah, I'm going to start by what is alchemy? Because you might be listening and you're like, what even is that? Alchemy is my favorite subject in the whole entire world. Chief alchemist over here. Alchemy is simply transforming something from one thing into another. In the ancient tales, in mysticism, these incredible chemists would change lead into gold, which we actually now know is possible through chemical process. They would change a base metal into gold. And this is as a metaphysical story about the raw material, the prima materia, if you will, of the inner animal being transformed or transmuted. You'll hear me use those two words interchangeably into the God self or the highest version of you. And so we're just going to transform shadow or that which is suppressed into light, which is that which is fully expressed. So that's what alchemy is. It's a beautiful art, beautiful paintings, sometimes very strange when you look at them, but all magic was created that way. For whatever reason, we went through a period where magic was forced underground. And when people expressed it, they had to express it in roundabout ways. So they used symbols and colors to do that because they're speaking to the unconscious or the subconscious as opposed to the conscious brain, because the conscious brain would have you beheaded. And so alchemy can be used in every aspect of your life. And so when you learn about these four pillars for business, you can also use them in your personal relationships. You can use them with your finances. You can use them in parenthood, personal development, whatever you would like, but they can be used in all aspects of life. They do require three things. There are three very important, undeniable requirements for this practice. The first one is bravery, because you're going to face some of your deepest, darkest shit. The second one is honesty, most importantly, with yourself. And the third one is deep self reflection. Know thyself. You have to be able to look at yourself with loving curiosity, is the way I like to say that. And so if you're not feeling very brave today, turn this off. If you're not ready to be honest with yourself about the icky, gicky, gross trauma that you faced, it's not the episode for you. And if you're not ready to really dive into knowing yourself, these next 4 episodes are not going to be ideal.
Before you go any further, I do think that when we talk about bravery, we are talking about facing your demons. That's not a magical, mystical term. Demons, dark monsters, dragons you referenced. This is what we mean by that. The things we don't want to look at about ourselves are the biggest demons. Right? And so when we're brave, like literally on the hero's journey, we need you to face the dragon. And then when it comes to self-reflection, know thyself, sure, turn off if you're not ready to do that. But that's why you're here, right? If you want to be an evolved entrepreneur, then we really need to learn who you are. You've been hiding that like all along. You've just been suppressing your truest nature out of shame, likely, potentially guilt. We could get into a number of other things there. But to establish those 3 things, right, which is bravery, self-reflection, honesty, and that probably acceptance and resistance, it's got to be in here somewhere. And sometimes the truth is ugly, but it doesn't make it any less valuable to know or to see. And we can only get to where we're going if we can be in acceptance. We can be in a place and a space where whatever comes up, we'll just work with it. That would be us standing in our sovereign. That doesn't matter what it is, we're going to take ownership of it. And then the warrior, that's where the dragon comes in. We're going to stand bravely in front of this dragon. We're not going to slay the dragon. We're going to stand there bravely. And so that's the journey we're going on.
We want to recognize that shadow was created to keep you safe. It is a precious thing. Shadow can be transmuted. Never tame your demons, but always keep them on a leash. We want to recognize that when it's time to employ that inner dragon, that's the fierceness of entrepreneurship. If you're in the entrepreneurial game, there is a fierceness required that is not required for you to just take a check and be told what to do. And so we want to honor that shadow, though it is deep distortion, though it is a false sense of light, when it's transmuted, it has to be done through the appreciation of the original wounding. Okay. And so the very next thing that I want to talk about here is shadow and light, just to give you guys an idea of what we mean when we say either or. Shadow is fear. It is distorted light information. And so it is quite literally a thing happened to you and you made it mean something about you. We call this making it matter or making it material. Okay, matter and material, maternal are all of the same root word. And so we literally make it matter. We bring it into physical existence. And this is where perspective is everything because you and I could be viewing the same exact situation, but your shadows are going to inform you about that situation in a different way than mine are informing me. So it is a distortion of information. Light is pure information. It's clarified information. It's moving with love and expansion, value for authentic self-expression, okay?
I was just going to say, I want to weigh in here with a little bit of neuroscience in the fact that this is both symbolic, but also like actually real. Because what we know about reality is that it is filtered through our perception. And you and I could see the same thing and not see the same thing. There's a great book called The Experience Machine. It's written by Andy Clark. He's a neuroscientist. And one of the biggest mind-blowing moments when I was reading this book is that up until relatively recently, we thought the world happened, our senses picked it up, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our touch, picked it up, made sense of it, and that was the world as we knew it. What we now know is that our brain hallucinates a reality, and then our senses only really raise a flag if there's something out of alignment with what our expectations or our hallucination was telling us about a thing. And that's because the hallucination is our subconscious creating the world around us. Our subconscious, which again, our brain's pretty lazy and it doesn't really want to have to do a thing. So it doesn't like constantly take in all the information from your bedroom that you already know what's there. The only thing that you ever notice about your bedroom is when something's on the floor or something's out of place. And then your conscious awareness, your senses are like, hey, look at that. That's not supposed to be there. And so our brain then comes in and is like, oh, yeah, I see a thing. But this is why like eyewitness reports for like crimes are so unreliable. The eyewitness will say something, then the video will come in and it'll show something absolutely different. And that's because the witness was filtering things through its own reality and it was only noticing things that it deemed appropriate. And so this is both an allegory, but it's also very, very true. So our perception of things is going to be different because it's being filtered through a different experience machine, which is driven by our subconscious brains, not our conscious brains. Our conscious brains are only brought into attention and awareness when we either call it forth or if there's something that our subconscious brain has been like, hey, you should look at this. It's wild. It's wild.
Absolutely. So to break it down, shadow forms when we perceive something in the world and then we make it mean something about us. That's it. That's when shadow forms. And so a drama or a trauma, you could say that a trauma occurred. The trauma itself is not what created the shadow. Our interpretation, our assigning of meaning for that trauma is what created a shadow. I'll give you an example. Your parents are like, go to your room, you're too loud. That's neutral magic. That's just what happened. Those are the facts. You internalized that and said, I'm too loud. Something must be wrong with me. I should be quiet more often. It's not safe for me to voice my opinion. No one listens to me. I'm always unheard. These are all assignments that you've given. The situation occurred. Now you're assigning meaning. This means something about me. And then you make that matter. You literally make it material. So what happens is now as an adult, your subconscious is like, it's not safe for us to voice our opinion. And so you don't. And what's happening is you're going to be constantly creating judgmental looks on the faces of people around you. You're going to be hypersensitive to people saying words like quiet or too much. And then that's just proof. All of these hand over to the saboteur, which is the proof collector. He's going to collect proof. The magician can also be a proof collector, but he's collecting proof of your potential. And the saboteur is collecting proof of your dramas and traumas and the things that you've assigned meaning to. Okay. And so then he's going to say, see, I told you you were too much, right? We're reaffirming. Light is restored when we make the unconscious patterns and stories that we have about ourselves conscious, which just means a lot of times in containers with me, people just talk. They just verbally vomit. And it's the most glorious thing on the planet because what happens is their shadows are just spewing everywhere. And I slowly but surely say, "Are you aware that you just said that?" And they go, "No." Most people have no idea what they're saying. And you'd be surprised. You get into a container with me and I start reflecting back to you what you're saying. And you're like, "Holy shit, do I say that about myself?" And then once you have it conscious, you move through the world, you go, "Oh my God, I say it about myself all the time. And I had no idea." So light is restored when we take the shadow self or the shadow belief and we make it conscious. We literally shine the light on that which is hidden. And you think about this in the physical world, like if there's a shadow on the wall and you shine a light directly at it, the shadow disappears. Shadow Alchemy 101, guys. That's it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you on the next. No, just kidding. So, integrity of creation hinges on the integrity of each pillar. I want to be very clear about that. Anything that you're going to be creating in the world, whether it's a new business, new relationship, if you're going to be healing old relationships, healing old businesses, whatever it is, the integrity of that creation hinges on the integrity of each and every one of these pillars. If you are in shadow in one pillar, you're in shadow in all of the pillars. So, what is shadow? It's that which we deny in ourselves. It's fear that has been shoved down or we've resisted looking at. Shadow is formed to save you from pain and to keep you safe. And so when your parents said you're too loud, it was easier for you to just be quiet so that you didn't get in trouble and thus reinforce that your parents didn't love you, whatever you made that mean about you. And unfortunately, it also inhibits growth. And so it wants to keep you safe. It wants to keep you in your comfort zone. No growth happens there. That's why it's important that we shine that light of consciousness on it.
I also want to mention that like shadows are subconscious. And so when we talk about bringing it to the conscious mind and shining a light on it, that means we have to reach into the subconscious and pull it forth. And we created these patterns a long time ago, and we've been running these patterns. We've been practicing these patterns for, I mean, for me, it's 41 years. I've been practicing my patterns. And so when you shine a light on it, it doesn't disappear. And so like when you shine a light on it, it becomes evident, not gone. And we know through brain science, the only way to change a pattern, a subconscious pattern, is through repetition. So to your point, once you bring awareness to it, you're going to start noticing it. And then you can make a conscious change, but you're still going to slip up. You're still going to fall into these patterns. It's still going to sneak up on you when you're triggered, especially if you've ever worked with or around the field of therapy. The prefrontal cortex is the first thing to go when you're in a heightened emotional state. And so you're going to revert back to your patterns without even noticing it and without really being able to control it if you're in an emotionally escalated state. So we're going to start making changes consciously, but it's going to take time. If you're like, man, I've been working on this particular shadow, I think your example of being too loud is a really great one, in the fact that when you are conscious about it, maybe you'll speak up a little bit more and you'll be heard. But then your default is not to speak up and to not share your opinion because it's just safer there. And so it's going to have to be a conscious thing, at least for a while, in order to repattern it.
It's also important to note that there are two types of alchemy: gentle alchemy and violent alchemy. Gentle alchemy takes place over the course of a very long time. You take small incremental steps. Violent alchemy is much more powerful and it's to the point, but it requires great sacrifice. And we'll go more into that, I'm sure, later on in these episodes. But also, you have to understand that this is going to trigger your nervous system. When you uncover a shadow pattern that says, "I'm too loud," and you slowly start speaking up little by little because you're conscious of it and that repetition starts to seep in, the very first situations that you practice in are going to fire your nervous system. That's what a trigger is. Anybody who's listening to this, you feel a trigger in your body. It's not like somebody says something that hurts you and your mind goes, "Oh, can you believe what they said?" No, your whole body's having a visceral reaction. You can feel it hot in your cheeks. Your stomach starts to turn. Your heart's pumping fast. Your palms are sweaty. Mom's spaghetti. Okay. Like you start to feel this in your nervous system. Don't run from that. Okay. That's the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And it's okay. Your job in moving into the pillars of light is to reassure yourself that it is safe for you to be loud. You're not going to reaffirm that belief if you continue to run every time someone tells you you're too loud. Okay. And so, yes, your nervous system will fire, and it is your job to sit with that, to be the safety that you didn't have as a child. Most of our shadows are formed between the ages of 0 and 7. This is because you're in the theta state and you're just absorbing everything as true. Okay? You have no discernment in that age group. And so you've likely been practicing these since then. And so it's going to bring up a lot of stuff when you start diving into these, okay? But it's so worth it, guys. If you've ever been like, "Wow, I would love to have a greater presence." If you've ever looked at somebody and said, "Gosh, I would love to communicate clearly in the way that they do," or "Man, I wish that there's just a peace and a presence around that person. I wish I had that." They're in their light archetypes, and that's available for you. It is a practice, okay? So, word of warning.
Yeah, a reminder that the subconscious doesn't speak words. It is emotional. Emotions live in the body. It's the only place they live. Yes, you cry and you laugh. Those are emotions of the body. You're going to feel it. Your heart's going to race. You're going to break out into a little bit of sweat because your subconscious body brain moves at a speed of light. Your conscious brain much slower. So you're going to have a visceral reaction to something. And then eventually your brain's going to be like, "Oh, I'm sad because this happened," or "I'm anxious because this happened," but not till much later. This is the surrender piece. This is the magician. They were trusting that the magician has us and that, okay, I'm feeling a thing. I'm going to let myself feel it. And probably a different topic for another time. But those who don't allow themselves to feel physically, you don't allow yourself to cry. You don't allow yourself to get angry. You don't allow yourself, to have these emotions. You're literally losing trust in your body. More shadow. We're just shoving it all down. So you're losing trust in your light, trust in your light archetype, in trusting that those emotions are for you. Those feelings are for you. Now, it doesn't mean you get angry, you got to go punch somebody. That's not what we're saying at all. But you can allow yourself to feel angry and then allow your conscious brain to catch up and say, "Oh, I can verbalize these now."
Yeah, most people are living in their saboteur, and the saboteur's job is to keep you as disconnected as possible from the body mechanism. The body is a incredibly powerful informational system. I'm talking billions of times more powerful than the conscious brain. People who are heavy into their conscious brain, heavy into logic of things, they're going to be in their saboteur and they're doing everything within their power to not feel. They're numbing in every way possible. And so getting into the body is going to be strange at first. You're going to be like meeting a strange, "Oh, hello, we've lived together for so long. I had no idea that you were here." But I can tell you it's very rewarding. All right, so there are 4 core pillars, which we touched on in the last one. I'm just going to give them to you here. The pillar of value, that's the one we're going to be covering today. It starts with the prostitute and the lover. The pillar of value hands off to the pillar of vision. Once I've established what it is in the world that I value, now I can form a vision of what is possible for me in the world. And so this is where we hand it over to the child sovereign. The pillar of vision is the child sovereign pillar. The sovereign is going to take responsibility for what we value. It's going to take full ownership for what we value. The child is going to say, "Can't somebody do this for me? I just don't want to do any of the work. Can you do this for you?" And if you have kids, they're the child. Like they like, "Mom, can you make this mac and cheese for me? I can't do it for myself." And so we're
It's the
gonna
"I don't know how,"
I don't
right?
know how. Yep.
It's not that I don't want to do it. That's more of like the victim, I think. It's that I don't know how. And instead of being like, "Let me learn how, let me
Yeah.
take the power card and figure it out," it's just very swampy down there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys will what you'll see too in all of these is that they hold hands to such a they're one wheel. It's one circle that we've divided into 4 pieces. And so they're all interconnected. They're like and you can't have one without the other. And so if you're in child, you're in victim, you're in prostitute, okay? So pillar of value hands off to the pillar of vision. We create a phenomenal vision. We're willing to take responsibility and accountability for ourselves. We're going to hand it over to the warrior. The warrior is going to draw boundaries. The warrior is going to protect its creation. The warrior is going to take action on what it said it was going to do. Okay. This is the pillar of will. And then finally, the pillar of action, the victim warrior pillar, is going to hand off to the saboteur magician, or the pillar of trust, surrender, faith, all these words. This is where we've carried it all as far as we possibly can. We've done everything we can on the human realm, and we're going to give it to God. Okay. And we're going to give it to God in integrity. And I can tell you, God loves integrity. God is going to reward you Your fields will be made bountiful, okay? Because God loves integrity.
Just maybe not in the way you think. To attach to the how it happens, just know that it happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so there are 4 steps to transmutation, and I'm not gonna tell you guys how to alchemize in this episode, or it would be 3 hours long. How to alchemize is going to be its own episode that you will get once we have completed all 4 of the pillars, okay? But just to give you an example, there are 4 steps to transmutation. We're gonna identify the limiting belief or the shadow. We are going to accept that it exists within us, because most people get to this stage and they start judging themselves. They're like, "Ugh, I don't want to believe that I'm judgmental. I don't want to believe that I'm in my victim sometimes. That's not me." And all that does, to your point, is forces it down even further and it creates more shadow. Okay. So we're going to identify, we're going to accept, then we're going to forgive whoever we need to forgive. We're going to forgive ourselves for believing that we were limited by what our mom said. We're going to forgive our mom for saying that, because she probably didn't intend to hurt us. Maybe she did. Maybe you had a vindictive parent. Then we got to forgive them for being vindictive. Okay. Forgiveness is for you. Disclaimer on forgiveness. Forgiveness does not justify what someone did to you. It does not say what you did to me was okay. Forgiveness says, I am okay, even though you did what you did to me. So forgiveness is for your freedom, not for theirs. Identify, accept, forgive. Lastly, we're going to integrate. We're going to look at that as a whole. Healing and whole come from the same root word, right? We're going to look at it as holistic. We're going to say, this is a part of me and it is beautiful. And then we can change it. You can, in the integration phase, you can repattern at will. All right, we're ready. We're going to jump into the pillar of value, the prostitute and the lover. So this is the channel of instigational energy. This is like springtime on the 4 corners of the earth. It's where everything's just beginning. It's the newness, and it's rooted in what we value. So the channel of instigational energy is the pillar of love, desire, values, worth or worthiness, cost, and sacrifice. Now, later on, you'll learn the warrior is the one who actually does the sacrificing, but the lover has to decide what she'll be sacrificing. And so this is the column of the soul, and I would call it pentacles in the tarot. It is the lower chakras in the chakra system. It's the base for which all things will be built on. The pillar of value has key questions. Who determines my value? Right? So this can quickly be externalized. If you allow your father's approval to determine your value, well, you've handed off your power card, which is in the next one, but that's what you've done there. So who determines my value? The answer in the lover is me. No one does but me. What do I seek to fulfill me? Now, in the prostitute, we're going to look to addiction. We're going to look to empty or vapid monetary gain, or, yeah, shallow things. The lover is deep. So, what do I seek to fulfill me? This is going to look like those soul passions, the things that you just can't live without. What power does the opinion or approval of others have over me? Right. And recognize that if the answer is any power at all, you're giving that to them. That's not always a bad thing. It can be beautiful to have someone else's approval. But if you need it and it's taken from you and it disrupts you at your core, okay, now you are in shadow. All right. So the prostitute, key attributes of the prostitute is that they're seeking approval at any cost. So this person is going to sacrifice all of their values. They're probably really wishy-washy on what they believe, and not in like a holistic accepting type of manner, but like that this person is just kind of all over the place as long as someone's approving of them. They're making choices based on affordability. I'm going to mic drop on that one for a second. Some of you needed to hear it. They're making choices based on affordability. Okay. The example I gave in my most recent blog post on sacrificial magic was that my daughter was accepted into a private Montessori nature-based school here, and it's a 5-figure investment. All of my friends are like, that's fucking crazy. You know what I mean? Like, why would you invest that much into kindergarten? And when I went to visit this school, I just fell in love. It was everything I wanted for her. It held true to every single one of my values. On the flip side of that, we went to public school, which is free. And for some of you, that's the right path. For me, it did not align with my values at all. I would absolutely be sacrificing on my values to send her there. but I could keep my 5-figure investment, right? So I could look at it and I could say, well, I'm willing to sacrifice my values so that I can keep these 5 figures. I can keep this money. But I, because I'm a practitioner of shadow alchemy, knew that my blessings, my reward would be well reaped if I sacrificed cash for my values. So we always want to be sacrificing whatever it is that's disrupting our values, not the other way around. But a lot of people will make, if they're in their prostitute, will make decisions based on money first and values last. The next attribute of the prostitute is that they compromise. Oh, this leads perfectly. They compromise values, desires, truth, beliefs, and self expression. They're willing to compromise on all of those. They lack self love. They lack self worth. They fear rejection. They have a deep seated shame. Shame is born in the pillar of the prostitute lover. And that's actually what you talked about in the last podcast of like, what do you love? And most people are trying to hide that away. It's not okay for them to love what they love. And so they just shove it down and say, I should be doing what everybody else is doing so that they accept me into the tribe.
I think that it's not inappropriate here to recognize that shadows can be weaponized. And standard religion is very good at utilizing shame to control by weaponizing this particular pillar.
Absolutely love that because actually shadows are being weaponized the majority of the time. And when you're in your light pillars, you are far harder to control if you're controllable at all, which can put you in what could be considered dangerous situations, but they're only actually dangerous to people in shadow because you recognize whenever you're in your light archetypes, whatever that universal force is that keeps your heart beating, it's got you. So they need external validation of their worth, of their value. This person uses sexual energy or charm as a means to gain approval. And so there is a beautiful way to use sexual energy, which we will talk about in depth when we talk about the 3 core magics, but sexual energy used to gain approval is considered shadow. They have unhealthy relationships with their sexual desires. And so that can be suppression. It can also be the lashing out of. Suppression is usually how we see this come about in our day and age, though. Flippant, they don't stick with any of their values. They don't even know what their values are. So there's nothing for them to stick to. They feel taken advantage of. They're easily tempted by outside influences. And so there's no core system, there's no core alignment. And so whatever they need to know what everybody else thinks. This person is going to go out of their way to find out what mom thinks about their decision, what grandma thinks about their decision, what do their friends think about their decision. And at the end of the day, they got so much conflicting information that they're even more confused and frustrated now than they were when they started.
A hot button word that we see that lives here is boundaries. That's here, wherein you're sacrificing your own boundaries to gain approval for others. They'll like me more if this, that, or the other thing. And in business, this can look like a boundary around your time, a boundary around your attention, a boundary around what you spend money on. Any of those things live in the prostitute.
Yeah, and again, holding hands because the prostitute is going to decide what she values. The warrior is the one who's going to enforce her boundaries. The prostitute has weak boundaries because there's no warrior at play. If you're in one shadow, you're in all of them, and she's in her victim. If you're in the prostitute, you're in your victim. And so there's no boundaries. And if there are boundaries, you're probably still setting them as threats and not as actual boundaries. We could do a whole episode on boundaries because it's such a delicious topic. But they also don't sacrifice or see worth in things. And so you could be right in front of somebody with the answer to all of their problems, a coaching program, maybe, or a mobile bar academy, if you will. And we're like, this small investment is going to make you 6 figures. And they're going to say, I don't see the value in that. And that's because they don't have value within. How you lead externally is how you lead internally. They don't have grounded sense of value within themselves. And so they're not going to be able to see value in what other, and this person is always too negotiating price. They're always like, oh, well, could I get it for lower? Could I get it for, if we take this out, could I get it for cheaper? Now, guys, you can actually use these can all be used as sales techniques when you can identify someone's shadow simply by holding them in their highest light. You show them what's possible when they work with you by holding them in their highest light. And likely you're one of the first people that's ever done that. And so they're more likely to convert with you, to work with you, to buy your product or service because you made them feel what was possible for them in their light archetypes.
I don't know where I read it, but somebody was selling a thing. It was a high dollar ticket to a buyer. And the buyer was like, is this the best price that you can do? And then they came in with, I don't know, like $1,000 less. We can do this. And so the guy repeats himself and he's like, is this the best deal that you can make? And then they're like, okay, like $500 less. And they're like, oh, is this the best deal that you can make? At this point, the guy's getting really frustrated. If I do like another 25 bucks off, will that do it for you? And the person who's writing, he was the salesman, and it was in hindsight. And what he didn't realize in the time, because he was in his prostitute, was that the dude was not asking for a discount. He was merely asking a question. Is this the best deal that you can make? But because the person was in the prostitute, he thought it was all about the money. And he was asking for more of a discount, which is not at all. At any point, had he been like, this is my best deal for you, dude, that would have been it. That guy would have probably signed and been on with his life. But because he was asking in a way that was being perceived by someone who thought it was about the dollar amount, the person making the sale was feeling like he was not being valued. He was feeling very triggered because like, how much do you want off? And again, like that was just from his perspective. He was feeling like he was not being valued because he didn't have a boundary. He wasn't in his sovereign. And the result was that he ended up selling the thing for much less than he could have.
That weaves perfectly into the next one, which is that they expect others to create or reflect their value. My daughter, she'll say, Mom, how do I look? And I'm very diligent because I have this wound myself. I'm very diligent in saying, how do you feel? Before I give any compliments, and I will give compliments because you look amazing. Look how stinking cute you are, right? But first, how do you feel? Because that's what matters, right? And I don't want her to grow up and so many women in our society, like we need the approval of a man. We need the approval even of our friends, like our homegirls. We're looking for someone else to say, you look beautiful. We're looking for someone else to give us permission to charge more, to increase our prices. Sarah, we've created a small empire on telling people it's okay for them to charge more. That's it. And they're like, well, okay, well, that's scary. And we're like, yes. And you fucking got this. And they're like, give me all the magic. You know what I mean? You don't need someone else to give you permission. And if you do, that's okay. Because listen, guys, we're all operating in shadow at some point. All right. I'm not going to sit here like I'm the holier than now. I only operate in my light archetypes. Not at all. I've gotten really good at spotting my own shadows. And I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough to have curated the people in my life to help see me in my highest light so that I can ascend back into the light archetypes. I am very conscious not to hang out with other shadow entities. This is going to be really pivotal for you guys. If you're trying to see things from a light archetype and you go ask mom for her opinion, knowing that mom is hyper judgmental, she also doesn't believe in making really good money, then that's what's going to be reflected back to you. You're going to go to mom and she's going to put you back in your shadow. Okay. So be very conscious of the curation of your people so that they can hold you in your highest light.
I also love that you called the mom a shadow entity because, again, we are trying to demystify a lot of these characters that we throw around as though it's like magic or make believe. And there's truth to them. They're just not in the way that you think.
Yeah, magic has been largely cartoonized. You know what I mean? Disney could be charged with the robbing people of their magic, in my opinion, because they've made children believe that if they're not shooting lightning out of their fingertips, that they don't have power. And that's absolutely false. Once my daughter said to me, I don't have real magic like Elsa. I said, you shut your mouth right now. I said, listen to me. I said, you have real magic. Elsa has pretend magic, and you remember that for the rest of your days. It's hard raising little magicians. All right. So, easily seduced by shiny objects. Oh my gosh, this person cannot make a decision to save their life. They're constantly like on to the next best thing. The grass is always going to be greener. They're just like, they're all over the place with what's better, 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 better. And they're never present in their body. The prostitute is never at home in her own skin. She needs somebody else to validate it. She needs somebody else to confirm her worth. This person is always looking outside of themselves for what is better.
And this skin could be your physical body or it could be your business. Your business is a skin, right? It is an entity that you've cast outside of yourself. And so if you constantly need somebody else to be telling you, oh, your business is so great, or oh, I really love this product, or oh, like whatever, it's one thing to build something that somebody needs and wants. But if you require that to have confidence in your business, if you require someone else to tell you how great it is in order for you to show up confidently within your business, that's the skin you're not comfortable in.
Yeah, and your triangle is inverted and you will not see results. Confidence comes first. This person does not trust themselves or others. If you're being called into leadership and you have a fear of letting go of control, of delegation, that comes from a wound in the prostitute lover pillar. That wound is a lack of trust. First of all, if you're over controlling, if you're somebody who identifies as a control freak, you have a superiority like complex thing that's going on where you think you're the most trustworthy. But actually, that's coming like I can do it better than anybody else. No one's going to be able to treat my clients like I do. Nobody's going to be able, right? Like all those beliefs, that's actually coming from a place of insecurity. Nobody's going to like that. I just hit some nerves right there. That's coming from you not actually trusting yourself. Control is a false mechanism of self trust. When we don't have self trust, we have to control. If you are a control freak, you lack self trust, and then thus you can't trust others. And here's the thing, guys, too. I wanted to say this earlier. You will create proof of this in your field. And so when you start leaning into the light archetypes, mom said I'm too loud, and I start going out and using my voice, the very first times you use your voice, people are literally going to say to you, why are you being so loud? Sir, you're yelling, right? Like, that's going to be reflected back to you. And that is for you because it's before you. So it's not so that you're like, oh, see, I am too loud and you shrink back into yourself. It is literally the universe giving you a golden opportunity to say, no, I am not. This isn't even as loud as I can be.
It might also be an opportunity for you to hone a skill that you never had the chance to develop. If you are just using your voice for the very first time and it comes out squeaky, I mean, it's hypothetically, it's like a little rusty. If you're just learning how to put words to the things that you've been thinking for 41 years and never giving voice to, it's going to come out a little wonky. And so the universe is probably going to give you feedback on that. That was a little abrupt. My whole journey on learning how to be a good communicator was rough as fuck. Let me tell you, I did it wrong a lot of times. And so, yes, you're going to get feedback and it may not be positive. What you won't do or shouldn't do is, to your point, shrink back in and stop doing it. You just put your big girl panties on and say, thank you for the feedback. I will integrate that into the next time I open my mouth.
It's like getting on a bike for the first time and falling off the bike and then deciding that biking isn't in your fate. You'll never be able to bike. You weren't born a good biker, so you'll never be a biker. And that's not true. In fact, great bikers are made through fucking broken knees and broken elbows. You know what I mean? Great bikers are just resilient. That's what we want to do. We want to create a resiliency.
By the way, I feel called out. I can bike, but what I can't do is drive a manual, because the first time I did, I got caught in a four-way intersection. Everyone was honking at me. I managed to get home and I said, never again. And to this day, never again.
Sacrifices were made. Now we're moving into the pillar of the lover. All right. So the lover values their own opinion and authentic self-expression over all else. Okay. And so this is where the lover would hand off to the warrior, and the warrior is going to make sacrifice for what the lover has determined is sacred. The lover determines what's sacred, the warrior sacrifices for the sacred. They're never for sale. They're never for sale. The lover, and this doesn't mean you never put things on sale in your business, but it does mean that you don't do it from a space of desperation. And you teach this beautifully in the academy. We're not going to go like, oh, nobody's buying. Let me discount the shit out of my services and cut into my profit margins. We're not negotiating on what we value. And so this can be seen in business, but it can also be seen in personal development, that you're not willing to compromise. This is my worth and this is my value. And you won't catch me playing it any smaller. The next one is that they know what they want and they allow themselves to have it. Did you hear that last part? Because knowing what you want is one thing. Allowing yourself to have it is where we enter the domain of the lover. They know what they want, they allow themselves to have it. They're aligned with their self worth. No one outside of them can change that. Their self worth doesn't vary from day to day or depending on the social situation. They know their self worth, they're aligned with it, they move from the seat of I am worthy. This person never compromises on their values, desires, truth, beliefs, or self expression. They don't bargain or negotiate. They do not settle. This is again, this comes right back to my example about Nimbus and putting her into a Montessori school. I knew that that private school would be an investment. And I could have settled. It would have been so easy for me to settle for public school. It's free, it's a small town, she'll probably be fine. I didn't want her to be fine. I wanted her to excel. I wanted her to be exposed to a curriculum that nurtured her innate talents, not just thrown into somewhere where she's going to have to conform and your bra straps can't be showing and you can't wear shorts that are shorter than your arm, whatever public schools are doing these days. That's not aligned with my values. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a little bit triggered, potentially it's a value for you and you haven't uncovered that. But also recognize that my values aren't your values. And so when I coach people who send their kids to public school, I'm not like, you have to do what I do. Maybe they don't value that. You know what I mean? Like that, they're free to do that. And you'll know if there's an insecurity when other people speak their values. If someone else says to me, well, I value public education, I think
Me,
it's
I'm a
a,
great example. My
yeah,
kids are in public school. It's a conscious decision. We can afford to send them to private school. We don't. Most of the private schools in this area are religious based, and that's out of alignment with my values. But also, there's a lot about public education that are directly in the value set. One, I believe we should have public education so that everyone has access to it. And here in the South, white flight set a lot of the money and means to private schools, which left a lot of underrepresented communities in the public schools, which then they don't get the funding, then they don't get the parental support. And so these are values in which we said intentionally, we're sending our kids to public school so that we're not a part of that problem. And so I'm a public school advocate. You've chosen private school. That just is us living our values.
and actually, you guys would be super surprised. Sarah and I have, I'm going to say conflicting with air quotes here, conflicting values on lots of things. And guess what? We're still besties. Like we never argue over it and this is a sovereign relationship. You have to understand the beauty and the freedom when you create, it's going to make me a little teary, sovereign relationships in your life because Sarah is in full acceptance of who I am and my value sets. They don't mean anything about her. She doesn't have to change who she is to be in my presence and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? I don't expect that Sarah, I'm not trying to convert her continuously to private school. You know what I mean? And like argue for my point. If I did, it would be an indication that I had shadow around that value. You see what I'm saying? So this is where we don't settle, but also the next one, we're prepared to sacrifice. And the next one, we're not concerned with the opinion or approval of others. If I'm in alignment with this value, I don't need anybody else to be in alignment with the value. I'm not trying to enforce it. It's just mine. It has nothing to do with my friends. So we're prepared to sacrifice. We're not concerned with the opinions and approval of others. We are confident in our own safety and security. This is another one. If Sarah came to me and she said, I have my kid in a public school, I would immediately have like a visceral reaction where I needed to convert her. We saw this beautifully laid out with COVID vaccinations. Whatever side of the fence you were on, everyone was trying to convince the other side that they needed to be on that. No, just do you, boo. Like, do you and be confident in it. Because if you're having to go outside of yourself because you don't feel safe, well, I'm not safe because this other person didn't get vaccinated or this other person wanted to get vaccinated, then you're not in alignment with your values. You're just being an asshole. So we're confident in our own safety and security. We don't need that to be validated by anyone, mostly because our warrior has got us. And we know that to be true. We're fully expressed. We cannot be tempted. I didn't even consider it. As soon as Mountain Sun let us know that Nimbus was in, I called the public school and I was like, we're withdrawing Nimbus's stuff. Like we're boom. There was no like temptation to send her to public school because it would be free. Nope, we're going this route. They live in an artistic expression. So this is the soul aligned nature. The soul has to have artistic expression in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a hobby, whether it's part of your actual business, but you have to be artistically expressed. And that can look any number of ways. They know their worth. They're stable. These people are very stable in their beliefs. They're very stable and grounded. When you're around them, you can feel that presence and that energy. They're trusting. Listen, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh, but how can I trust so and so after they lied to me?" Easy. You just now trust them to lie. You don't have to sacrifice being a trusting person because someone else has demonstrated that they are not trustworthy. Instead, you can give them trust and know that they may show up in dishonest ways.
I love this one. I once watched a TikTok a long time ago of this woman who basically said, "You'll never really truly understand how much my life changed when I just decided to trust everyone, whether they deserved it or not, whether they disappointed me or not. That isn't a me thing." Right? You just move through the world with an immense amount of trust, and you understand that sometimes that's not going to work out well for you. But the change in who you are and how you show up when you just lead with the assumption that everyone is operating with the best of intentions. That's one of my core things, is to always operate as though everyone's working with the best of intentions. And I truly believe that everyone does show up the best that they can in that moment. And that's a level of trust. I'm going to show up the best. I'm going to trust that you're showing up the best too. The other thing that I want to mention here is go back to what you said about artistic expression. Artistic expression is simply being creative. And the creativity is literally creating, creator, right? We are all creators. And so whether the only thing in your world is what you creating you, that is still artistic expression. Now, maybe you decide that you love fashion design, or you love to paint, or you love to, I'm a crocheter, or you're a writer, or you're a screenplay writer. These are all facets of artistic expression, but that's not the only way to be artistic. As long as you're creating in the world around you, you are a creator, you are utilizing artistic expression.
Man, I wish that I could dig so deep into that just one piece and how freeing and how liberating it is. Because the closer you are to your own authenticity, the more artistic you are. And not artistic like you actually create any, to your point, any type of art. Like you yourself are art. It's part of the word heart, right? Like you're, as long as you're really aligned with your heart, with your core values, then you are an artist. Your life is artistry. And so that leads beautifully into the final attribute of the lover, which is that they see or find the beauty in everything. When you move into the pillar of the lover, you're quite literally creating the alchemical marriage, the divine marriage between you and the creator, the dance of this incredible world being light and shadow, being darkness, being sadness. You can find beauty in the deepest pits of grief. You can find beauty in the highest altitudes of joy and everything in between. And then your world just lays out as this beautiful romance between you and God, you and the creator. Instead of like constantly being waiting for the next shoe to drop, you're in this beautiful exchange with the creator where you're like constantly waiting on the next wink. You're like constantly waiting on the next divine chocolate covered strawberry, if you will. And it's just happening all the time. The universe is winking at you, it's flirting with you, and you've made a lover of it. And this is becoming a lover of the universal force. And that all lives in this pillar. And it's available for you to see the world as art, to see yourself as art, and to be fully self expressed without having to sacrifice.
It might also be important here to recognize that the entire journey is the art. So when you see beauty in all of life, that means you see beauty in the absolute drudges, not because it is beautiful, but because it is a part of the whole, and not because you want to keep the drudges or the terrible parts of the world the way that they are, but because if you didn't see it for what it was, how could you change it? How could you be moved to make a change? And in every hero's journey, there isn't a single book out there that has a narrative and an arc that doesn't have struggle. Would it be a journey at all if there wasn't some opposing force that you're working against? The conversation I had with my sister the other day, we're trying to be the best parents we can. We're awakened parents, we are emotionally intelligent parents, and yet still, there will be trauma. And so I've come to call this the spice of life, because what person would you be with no bruises, with no traumas, no shadows. Now, as we grow and we can choose the shadows we want to keep. And that is an intentional creation of life. But that doesn't mean you're going to get into any part of life without a shadow. There will always be shadows. That's what creates facets. There's not a single diamond that looks like a diamond if it doesn't have cuts and angles and refracts and reflects light in a very specific way. And so we're not here to erase all trauma. You got to keep some. And some people are like, trauma is what makes funny people. Yes. If you had no trauma, you probably wouldn't be funny, but also anything else. You wouldn't be interesting. You wouldn't be intelligent. You wouldn't be discerning enough to know what to say when and when not to say it. And so the beauty of life and being in love with life also means that you recognize that even the really shitty parts are part of the greater story and a part of the overall beauty, because you cannot have even a beautiful painting without both shadow and light. You have to use contrast in order to create art. And that's just the part of it. So I don't want the recognition that Sarah and Dawn think that you should be in love with life to think that we're over here and we're like the love and light girlies, because that's not us at all. We're never going to condemn the darkness. We love it there for what it offers and for what it, creates in contrast.
The dimensions are absolutely required. The inner demons, the inner shadows, the inner dragon. You have to have an antagonist to have a good story. Otherwise, who's going to read this? Would you come here? Would you come to Earth? Would you incarnate if it was like, hey, you're going to live forever. Everybody's going to live forever. Everything's going to live forever. Only happy things are ever going to happen. But like, how would you even know that they were happy? Because you had nothing to compare it to, right? This world is a world of polarity, a world of extremes. And so the dimensions of life are what give it depth and range and contrast so that we can experience how beautiful this place is. And so appreciation for the things that hurt is part of the process of surrender and acceptance. And that doesn't mean you want to keep them, to your point. It doesn't mean that you make idols of them and worship them. It just means that you're aware that there is a such thing as necessary evil.
Who would have watched Star Wars if there wasn't Darth Vader? That wouldn't have been an interesting story at all.
Right, right, right. Okay, so that was it. That is the lover, prostitute, pillar of values. Next episode, we will move into the pillar of vision, the child and the sovereign, and we will be talking about the channel of individuation or the individuation of energy. And so that's going to be another yummy one. And for now, let us know what you thought. Hit us up in the comments, DM us on Substack and our socials, wherever you want to find us, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one.